Now let us study another technique of analysis called game theory. We believe there is a lot of interdependence in decision making, and how to model that and how to explain outcomes when we have interdependence in decision making. And so this theory arose to fill that gap. And what is interdependence in decision making? Consider the following. In a classroom setting, in a way, there are two players. One is the teacher and other are the students. And how does a teacher behave in part depends on how students behave with the teacher. Similarly, how do students behave in part depends on how the teacher behaves with the student. Or this is called interdependence in decision making. The easiest way to understand and appreciate game theory is consider any situation like a game, and you could consider a football game, you could consider a basketball game, or any game you like. Since we are trying to understand game theory and it is a theory, and so we do require a number of definitions, formal definitions. So here is the first definition. What is game theory? Game theory is a study of decision making in a situation in which there are conflicts as well as cooperation. Game theory. What is a game? We need to define this formally as well. This is a competitive situation where two or more players pursue their own interest and no player can dictate the outcome. So the kind of game we are looking at is two or more similar level of players. For example, if I play basketball with, say, Michael Jordan, this will not be considered a game because we already know the outcome. So when we are looking at people with similar skills or similar endowments, what we are trying, we do not on a priori basis know what the outcome will be, and so this is what we are trying to figure out. So this is a formal definition of game theory as well as game. As far as games go, we distinguish between two types of games, one called a cooperative game and the other one called a non-cooperative game. Let me just state the formal definition and then I'll explain it through some examples. When we say cooperative game, what we have in mind is players can negotiate binding contracts that allow them to plan joint strategies. For example, when you go to a used car dealer, you talk to the person and you try to haggle over the price, and ultimately we come up with some kind of an acceptable outcome. That situation is considered an example of a cooperative game. So wherever you require, where you have bargaining, haggling over price, or people sit down together and figure out the outcome, it is called a cooperative game. Non-cooperative game, on the other hand, is just the opposite. Negotiation and enforcement of binding contracts are not possible. So here people basically do not communicate with each other, they just play the game as professionals. So you should know the difference between what is a cooperative game, where you talk to the others, and non-cooperative game, where you do not talk to the others. In game theory, we'll look at non-cooperative. Since we are looking at a game, each game will have a player, and by player we mean it could be a single person or a group of people as if in a company. That's what we would call a player. We also believe that each player is endowed with some resources, and this could be money or it could be talents. For example, when you look at a basketball player like Michael Jordan, this person is talented, so he has some kind of resources or endowments. Then whenever we play a game, rules of the game are very important. And how do we define rules of the game? They describe how these resources can be utilized. Either it could be money, it could also be your physical strength, how it can be utilized, and that will give us the rules of the game. Associated with every game is also the payoff. By payoff we mean outcomes that generate rewards or benefits. Now when we have a game, there will always be strategies, and this is the formal definition of what we mean by a strategy, and that is a complete specification of what actions a player will take under each contingency of the game. If you behave like this, this is what I will do. If you behave like that, this is what I will do. And in high school football, you might have seen what coaches do is they will look at the videos of the rival team, and then they will try to figure out this is how they play, and if they play like this, this is how we should respond. If they play like that, this is how we should respond. So a strategy, once again, is a complete specification of what actions a player will take under each contingency of the game. Then we also have a definition for what is called a dominant or the best strategy from the perspective of each player, and that is, irrespective of what your rival does, this is the best thing for you or the best strategy for you. If you are able to figure this out, this will be called your dominant strategy, and this is what you will choose. The last thing in this is the Nash equilibrium. And what is Nash equilibrium? It's just an intersection of dominant strategies of different players. Or, in other words, Nash equilibrium is a set of strategies such that each player believes that he or she is doing the best he or she can given the strategy of other players, and other players do exactly the same thing, and if all these match, what we have is Nash equilibrium. Then sometimes what we do in the playing of game is we undertake what are called strategic moves. First the formal definition, and then I'll give you some example. A strategic move is one that influences the other person's choice in a manner favorable to oneself by affecting the other person's expectations about how oneself will behave. A strategic move. For example, suppose I see a student talking in class. What I can do, I want this person to stop talking in class. So what I would do is I'll call him to my office and tell him not to talk in my class. And suppose he refuses to listen to me. In such a case, what I have to do is issue a threat, and that is maybe tell him I'll drop him from the class if he or she does not behave in this particular manner. And again, if this person continues to talk, what I do is I simply drop him from the class roster. So here what I have been doing is I've been undertaking strategic moves, hoping that the person will change his or her behavior in a way that is what I want, or in a way that is favorable to myself. As far as strategic moves go, and this is pretty interesting, what we do is we may undertake threatening moves or non-threatening moves. Now whenever you undertake moves like this, particularly the threatening one, it is entirely up to the opponent to figure out whether the threat is credible or non-credible. For example, when you look at the conflict between the US and Iraq, what you find is the president of the US threatened president of Iraq with consequences. And for some reason, the president of Iraq, that is Saddam Hussein, he took this as a non-credible threat. He believed that US likes to talk and will never follow it up with actions. And that is why the US had to go into war, just to tell rest of the world it doesn't mean what it says. So just remember this, whenever we undertake strategic moves, they could be threatening or non-threatening. And if they are threatening, it is entirely up to the rival or the opponent to figure out whether the move is credible or non-credible. So these are the basic formal definitions that you require in order to understand game theory. And in the next lecture video, what I'll do is I will look at some real world examples. Thank you for your time.